So I want to start with just the context of what's going on before we open this book. And then we'll be able to get into the questions. Questions in Torah are really powerful because they serve kind of like as an entryway, as a passport to get from one realm of Torah to the next. Within Torah, Torah is an amazing book. The Torah was written in detail with immaculate, impeccable perfection and precision. And what was chosen to be included and not included, what it chose to say and which way it says it, and the order that the words are placed, the meaning of every verse, every letter contains layers upon layers of meaning. And so here as well, in the beginning of this book, we're going to discover that. But in order to get from one layer to the next, we need some questions. So I'm going to read the verse in Hebrew. I'll translate it. And then we're going to ask two questions, even though there's many more. And through this, we'll uncover an amazing teaching that we can take home for spiritual lunch to nourish our day. What we're learning now is Chassidus. Chassidus has two main objectives. Number one, to reveal the supernal source and divine origin of every idea, law, verse, word, even letter in the Torah. And secondly, to unearth the divine message for human behavior and destiny that exists in every law as well. So it wants to show us, Chassidus teaches us where the law is coming from and where the law is meant to bring us to. So let's see how Chassidus learns this verse in the opening of the book of Vayikra. The verse, we'll start with the context, as I mentioned, of what's happening before, and then we'll go into the questions. The context is the Jewish people just finished building the tabernacle. The divine presence has just rested among the people in a visible, physically visible format with the cloud of glory descending upon the tabernacle, and the Jewish people are extremely happy and in a place of healing, knowing that God is resting among them. But the question is, this is the first time now that we're having such a life of a space, a physical space where any moment you can go there and see the presence of God and have a spiritual experience. This is the first time we have such a thing. Any moment you want, you can go there and have a repeat of the Sinai experience that you had just a few months ago. So how do you live in this new kind of lifestyle? This is where the book of Vayikra, of Leviticus, opens up. God says to Moses, speak to the people and tell them. Now I'm going to read the verse, chapter 1, verse 2. Speak to the children of Israel and tell them, Adam, a man, ki yakrav mikem, when he brings a sacrifice from you, mina behema, mina bakar, or mina tzayin, from cattle, from sheep, whatever it may be, takrivu es karbanchem, they shall bring forth their sacrifice. Now, on this verse, there's two things that really trouble us in the grammar of the verse. Number one, who is the sacrifice? What is the sacrifice? We read it and we translate it as a person is sacrificing an animal. But if you actually read the text and translate it literally, it says, Adam, a man, or man, ki yakriv, when he sacrifices mikem, from among you. Meaning to say that man is taking one of you as a sacrifice. That's how the verse reads in its simplest form. That's a little strange. Torah is against human sacrifices, but that's the literal meaning. Secondly, when the verse then goes ahead and clarifies that, yes, we're talking about bringing an animal sacrifice, when it clarifies it, the Torah continues and says, from the cattle, from the sheep, you shall bring forth your sacrifice, or they shall bring forth their sacrifice in plural form. Which means that in the beginning it says, if a man brings a sacrifice, singular, and then it ends, from the cattle, they will bring their sacrifices. It's not how Torah works. Either it's going to say both in singular, when a man brings a sacrifice, he shall bring it from a cattle or sheep. Or it should be both plural. When the people will bring sacrifices to God, they shall bring it from cattle and sheep. Why is the first part singular and the second part plural? So we have two questions. Number one, the grammar is written as if to say man is bringing a sacrifice from you, from the people. And secondly, it ends off plural. They shall bring the sacrifices from the cattle and sheep. So to answer this question, we got to dig a little bit deeper and open up the entranceway, enter a new realm in the meaning of the verse. And this is the next stage in understanding the verse. We know that the word Adam in Torah, man, can refer to man on earth, to us, human beings. And man in Torah can also refer to the supernal man, the Adam HaElyon, as we find in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, where Ezekiel tells us about the vision that he has. It talks about that he saw a vision of a man sitting on the chariot. Demus kimare adam, that it looked like man. And of course, this is not referring to that he saw a human being sitting on the chariot. It means, as Chassidus explains, based on Kabbalah, that Ezekiel saw the spiritual structure and characteristics in the divine worlds that make up what ultimately became the structure and characteristics of the human being on earth. So we have 3 cognitive faculties and the 7 emotional attributes, and everything that makes up the characteristics of man on earth is mirrored like the supernal man, meaning like the way God's structure of stages in revelation of godliness to the world. At a certain point, there was a pocket of stages of revelation that makes up the way man on earth is shaped and is mirrored of. So Adam, man in our verse, says Chassidus, is referring to the supernal man, to God, who made us in his image. And the verse is telling us, Adam, Moses, tell the people that when God comes to them and brings them as a sacrifice, brings the person as a sacrifice, now we have to explain the second part of the answer. And that is the word sacrifice. The word in Hebrew for sacrifice is karban. Karban really means to come close, from the word karov, to come close, to be attached. It received the translation, the meaning of sacrifice, because what happens when we sacrifice? We come close, we become attached to something outside of us. The sacrifice that's brought on the altar becomes fully consumed in the fire of God and comes close to God, the closest possible. It loses its entire prior identity and it becomes one with God. How much closer can you get than that? So sacrifice became the English translation of karban, because that's what karban is. When you come close to God and you all of a sudden attain this new identity, that you're an identity of utter, complete, absolute closeness to God. With that in mind, let's read the verse with both of these points. Adam, when the supernal man above, ki yakriv, when he brings close, mikem, from among you, he brings one of you, any one of the Jewish people sitting now in the desert. God says to Moses, tell the people, at any moment, from the spiritual energy of the tabernacle that exists among them, there can come a spiritual awakening that will pull someone close to godliness. It will pull them in. They'll feel uplifted. They'll feel themselves having a vision, a dream, a connection to godliness, feeling themselves removed and uninterested in the mundane falsehoods of the world, and they'll feel uplifted, not through any efforts that they put in. They didn't do meditation, they didn't put work, they just feel uplifted. That is God's work. God is doing that and pulling them in, making them a sacrifice. He's bringing them close to God. But that's just like going up on the ski lift and being lifted up above. That's not the thrill. God says to Moses, after that happens, there's work to do. What's the work to do? Inside of us, every single one of us, we have 2 parts. We have the godly part of us, the soul that energizes us and pulls us towards holy things, godly things, selfless activity. And we have the animalistic part of us, the characteristics that make us be selfish. In Tanya, we call it the godly soul, the animal soul, whatever way you want to call it. So God says to Moses, I'm only going to access, when I inspire someone, I'm only going to access their godly soul. When the supernal man inspires, gives a spiritual awakening to one of us here on earth, we're only giving an awakening to the godly soul within them. But then that godly soul becomes close. It's uplifted from the dirt of the world, and it's close to God. It's open. But at that moment, the godly soul has to remember that it now has work to do to go to the counterpart of itself, the animal soul within himself, and explain purpose, and explain meaning, and explain destiny, and explain what we're doing here in the world to the animal soul, and explain how beautiful it is to be close to God, and explain how beautiful it is to be attached to our true selves, to eternity, to the infinite divinity. And when we work on our animal soul, for some people it's like a sheep, for some people it's like a cow. Whatever type of animal we contain inside of ourselves, the godly part of us goes to the animal soul and goes and makes a sacrifice out of our animal soul. And then when that happens, both parts of us are now in tune and are now one with divinity, with godliness, with our purpose. And both of parts of ourselves can now enjoy this special experience of being close to God, which includes fulfilling the purpose that we need to do in the world. This explains why the beginning of the verse begins in singular and the end of the verse ends in plural. Because the beginning is the supernal man bringing a sacrifice from the people, bringing me close to God, but the supernal man only touches the godly part of us, gives it a boost, gives it a quick burst of energy to lift it up out of the dirt of the worldly matters. And then when that happens, don't just enjoy and say, I had an amazing spiritual experience last night. No. Then you got to take that and work on the animal part of yourself and bring that along for the ride. And when we do that, it ends in plural, because now the animal soul and the godly soul in us have now become sacrificed to God, have now become attached, completely committed, subsumed, absolutely in the fire of God, in the purpose why we're here, to do the work and make the world a messianic place where the presence of God and the Shekhinah is upon all of us, and we're all living in that embrace and in that experience of enlightenment. Now, today we don't have a temple. Today we don't have a tabernacle to go to. Where can we go if we seek that initial awakening? Today, says the Torah, you can find it in Torah study. And there's more to explain on this. But for now, in the Torah, our teachings tell us the divine presence, the Shekhinah, resides. Just as in the tabernacle, there was a physical manifestation of the divine presence that everyone who walked to the temple saw. God is there. God is everywhere. But the divine presence is revealed there, and I can feel it and I can touch it there. The same thing, says our great sages and the mystics teach us, we can find when we enter a space of Torah study. If we open up a Torah book and we study and we learn it, we will be able to also attain an appreciation of the divine presence that rests in the words and letters of the Torah, which will give us that awakening, that spiritual ski lift to the top of the hill. But the end is not to stay in the amazing teaching of the Torah, which we're having right now. Now that we had the Torah teaching, we have to go out and teach it to the animal part of ourselves and work on that animal and bring it towards and schlep it along so that the whole collective of my existence can become a sacrifice to Hashem, can become completely devoted, dedicated, committed, and become one with my service to God and making the world, refining myself and the world around me to become the vessel in where, God willing, very soon we will see the divine presence revealed and manifested in a tangible way in the entire world, when it will in its entirety become a temple for God. Have a good Shabbos.